Situation, I mean, I guess it would depend on the situation, what I would say, but I wouldn't tell them they weren't in the life of Christ. I would explain the dynamic so they could hear it. Depending on what they were upset about, it all depends. But I do a lot of counseling, and all that I do is I take the wisdom that was revealed in the resurrection, the ascension, and the cross, and I apply it to whatever we're talking about. So depending on what they bring up, I'll bring up the truth. So if you're talking about a relationship, let's say where they feel hurt by something someone else did to them,
Right.
I would probably just explain the dynamic that would cause a person to hurt them. If I thought that they were, put it this way, if I thought they were young in the Lord and they weren't grasping what I was just saying about my life's preserved eternally, so who cares? Smack me on both sides. Glory to God. I think I would probably feel the best way to go about it would be to be explaining the dynamic of how the heart works. And so probably what I'd do is I'd take that person they feel hurt by, I'd put that person in front of them, and I'd probably explain the pain and the dynamic going on in that person that caused them to do that. I would explain the mind of Christ, or the way Christ would see what they did. I wouldn't tell them they need to think it, or they should think it, or any of that. I would just explain what it was that would happen there. And then it would be up to them in dealing with their heart. To either, some people I find grab it immediately, and they see it, and they're like, oh, yeah, and the tears just come, and forgiveness happens, just like that. Some people, it's still a little, it can be a sticking point, because a lot of people have been taught by their trauma that they must protect themselves. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways they protect themselves is by scapegoating the other people, blaming them for the pain. What I do is I reveal that it isn't the person that's done this to them, it's the sin that's dwelling in the person that's done this to them. I remove the person from the scenario. And I just preached,
not long ago.
Not long ago, I preached a message called Health and Healing for Relationships. That I explain a lot of these dynamics. But it's kind of like what Paul said when he said, when I'm walking, when I'm under the law, when I'm believing in the wisdom of the serpent, I find that I'm doing the things that I don't want to do. I find in my heart I actually want to do this, that, and the other, but I find something else going on, taking me captive and making me do things that I don't even want to do. And then he'd cry, oh, wretched man that I am. And he's describing part of that dynamic, and that's part of how I would explain to people about others that have hurt them. And I've seen great success in all my counseling with this. People getting set free. Now, some, their heart, it takes more for the walls to come down, because they've been hurt so bad that they're scared that if they let go, some people think by holding on to the pain, that's protecting them. And the moment they release the person, they think now they're wide open to the pain again. And so that goes on, but that's the way I go about it. I explain what happens.
So what I'm hearing you say is you take the other person, the perpetrator,
yes,
and you begin to talk about them from what must be going on in their life, what's the systems that they must be believing in, and how that's manifesting itself, and yet at the same time, how God sees them.
Yeah. And so I think one of the examples I used with one person was they were so upset about what somebody did to them, and so I just said, now imagine that person that did this to you, imagine that you could see them and you saw a person standing next to them with a gun to their head and told them if they didn't do it, they were going to kill them. Yeah. And that's why they did it. I said, now would you be upset still then? No, absolutely not. And see, that's kind of what's going on. We think people are making choices in their head to hurt us. Paul said our members are taken captive. He said when we present ourselves to the wisdom of the serpent, it takes our members captive and it makes us do things we don't want to do. These people that have hurt us, they're not happy about it. They feel miserable about it. They feel condemned about it. They feel, oh, wretched man that I am. They're lowly and miserable. They actually only desired to do good. And they actually came and did something that was evil instead. They're miserable. They're in bondage. Mm-hmm. And I would just explain that dynamic. And through the course of doing that, what's in their heart's going to come out. And then that leads itself to other opportunities to come in. Because as their heart's revealed, the pain, that it'll start coming out. And then you have other opportunities just to be led by the Spirit to come at it. And that's just
right.
how
The other example that he used that was really good was the movie about the guy's hand that was possessed. And even though the guy's hand was still part of his arm. The hand did things of its own mind, right? And the guy couldn't control it. It's the same thing. It's like Romans 7. It's exactly the movie of the hand.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me once I saw that so clearly several years ago how I missed it before. But Paul clearly said, we have this idea when people commit sin against us that they're throwing a party in the back about it.
Yeah.
That they like held a meeting and they calculated to come and do these hurtful things to us. No, they're in bondage to sin and death.
Right.
And Paul labels it perfectly. He said, no, man, I didn't want to do those things that I did. In fact, I found myself feeling condemned and miserable because I did it. And so I use people's parents, most people's parents, most people have had trouble with their parents. And what I do when I counsel them is I tell them, we just use dad. I tell them, your dad only ever wanted to love you with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his strength. And I'll put their dad in the Paul scenario. And I'll say, but he found something, taking him captive, keeping him from doing what he always wanted to do, which was to show you how beautiful you are, how much he loved you, how much he wanted to lay his life down for you. And he found every time he tried to show you that, every time he tried to show you how much he loved you, he found something else coming out of him. Something that he didn't want to come out, but he found coming out of him even though he didn't want it to come out. And that he couldn't find the ability to love you the way that he actually wanted to. And then he felt horrible about himself because of it. And man, you start explaining what's really happening, and I've seen many people just break down on the spot. Because in their heart, they kind of already feel it. You know what I'm saying? Like God's already been trying to minister. It's just now a person comes along and gives a confirming word. And they can see their dad in a completely different image. Most of the time, it isn't what a person's done to you. It's what you think is in their heart towards you.
Exactly.
And so now if I can come and explain to them how it can be true that the person who hurt them the most, which is mostly people close to us,
Right.
how they actually only loved you with all their heart, with all their soul, and with all their strength, but they didn't find the ability for it to come out of them. Man, when they see that, it's like freedom comes. They forget about what happened because now they're persuaded that they loved them. And that's all that mattered. The majority of the pain comes from what the people think they feel in their heart.
Right. They're living in someone else's head.
They're living in someone else's head.
Right.
Yeah. Like I said, they become marred.
Yeah.
And I use the example of a serial killer because our society says that people don't have a conscience. Serial killers particularly, they have no conscience.
Yeah.
And so our beliefs about people who have hurt us is that they're just, horrible people that get together and throw parties and plan to hurt us. And I took the example of this serial killer, the Green River murder. He murdered like 40-something people, butchered them. Well, through the course of his court case, they brought up all the people's families, and they just, you're going to hell. I hate you. Can imagine the pain. And he sat there just stoic, nothing. Yeah, so what? It's good. Then this old guy gets up looking like Santa Claus with overalls on. And he says, sir, and he killed this guy's only daughter. In fact, this guy had no one else in his whole life except for his daughter. His wife was dead, just this girl. And he said, sir, all these people have said how they hate you and want you to go to hell. But my God says that I should forgive you. And he says, you made that really hard to do, sir. And he said, but I forgive you. And that serial killer's face just broke, started shivering and shaking, and you saw his eyes start watering with tears. And right there, you could see that guy is in bondage to sin and death and actually feels miserable on the inside for what he's done. But he didn't find the ability to not do it. That doesn't take away the pain of those people dying or make it okay that he did it. We're not justifying his action, but we're describing the dynamic at work. Because if I get up and kick this table with my foot might hurt for 3 minutes, and afterwards I'm going to completely forget about the pain. But if Emery comes over here and kicks me and breaks my foot, the pain might leave in 3 minutes, but there's going to be a pain in my heart now. Because I'm going to say this person has now done something to me. Right? When it's a person, it becomes personalized, and it hurts our hearts more because we think that it takes away from our value and worth when another person has done something harmful to us. Well, when we remove the person, divorce the person from their action, now we sit with an action. What is this thing that's done something to me? And now we see it's not people who have hurt me, but it's sin and death trying to hurt all people.
Right.
And now that allows me to view it differently.
Yeah.
That is good.
And as you hear this truth and it starts working in you more and more, you find that you don't really get offended anymore. Or if you do, you find the mind of Christ sort through it real quick like in you and send it away. And you find, that's what I find happening to me more and more, is that the mind of Christ will interpret it and it'll send away the offense. And I'll find freedom. And I'll realize, oh, it's not them that's done this to me.
That's right.
And then I'm free to love them again.
So thanks for veering into that, because I'm getting ready to be in a situation of counseling with somebody that's the exact, and this has given me exactly what I needed to do. This portion, it's all been great tonight, this portion
Yeah, good.
is what I'm
Awesome.
getting ready to need.
Well, there